Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Today, we're going back to the Grand Poobah, the 5-star general of the Mental Midget Army. The man who is to Flat Earth what Yoko Ono was to John Lennon. That is, if Yoko put John smack dab in the middle of the friend zone. We're talking about none other than Mark Sargent. And today, we're going to see what he has to say about maps. Now, I cut out the first few minutes of this to lessen the chances that you'll fall asleep. He basically just explains what the U.S. Geological Survey is. At one point, he calls them a large, really boring government group, and for once, I agree with him. So you can only imagine how boring it would be to hear him talk about it. So let's make this one quick and dirty. There isn't much to cover here, so it shouldn't be a very long video.
What does this large, really boring government group have to do with the flat Earth? To understand that, you have to look into their origins, which is in geography. To do this, you'll need to open another page that specializes in maps. The maps you see in this video are from Wikipedia, but there are others you can reference as well. The wiki list of map projections isn't much to look at as a whole.
One way flat earthers attract new flat earthers is by glossing over terms or lying by omission. What old Marky Mark here failed to mention is what a map projection is. The definition is, a map projection is a way to flatten a globe's surface into a plane in order to make a map. Interesting, don't you think?
Although there are a number of interesting takes on the worldview. Not only do they have just about every perspective when it comes to the land we live on, but some detailed information on where the map originated, including name type, the origin or creator, and the year the map perspective was proposed. Now, some of these will be very familiar, especially the ones that you would see on your classroom wall. There are a number of variations here, but the one that has been debated on recently would be this one, the Gauls-Peters, which accurately shows the size difference between the continents, the most obvious clue being that the white continent of Greenland is actually tiny compared to Africa. But I digress. If you keep going down through all the different shapes, you'll get into circular maps, but only one of these is a top-down perspective that shows the continents in the center, surrounded by an unbroken ring of ice. In Wiki, it's called the azimuthal equidistant.
It's not just called that on Wiki. It's called that everywhere.
And just to make it easier, I'm going to abbreviate and call it AE for short. Why is this map so interesting? Well, if you're looking at the wiki page, you'll spot a few reasons. The first is that in the notes section of the map, and I quote, "used by the USGS in the National Atlas of the United States." It also mentions that it is used as the emblem of the United Nations. Of all the maps on this screen, it is the only one that references a group of any kind.
Wikipedia is a knowledge database of sorts. Do you think that a page that tries to compile knowledge would leave out the map being used by one of the largest international organizations in the world for their logo? Or that it's somehow diabolical that it mentions it?
And if you keep this page open and navigate over to the Flat Earth section of Wiki, you'll notice towards the bottom of the page a similar map. I've referenced it here, and you can tell quite easily it's identical, but not referenced or linked as the AE model.
So a bunch of dummies found a map that looks like a flat Earth and ran with it since they don't have a better one, and you think that means something and should be linked back to the original real map? All it means is that you don't have a model, and you're unwilling to do the research to find out what the map does.
To make things even more strange, we go back to the USGS model, and you see that it was first proposed 1,000 years ago, and you may think, well, that's a bad link. So you compare it with the person who proposed it, and you get this guy, Al-Biruni. Who was Al-Biruni? Well, he lived around 1,000 years ago and was considered one of the greatest scholars of his era, schooled in multiple sciences. Have you ever heard of him? I hadn't. Maybe it's multiple bad references in Wiki. Well, no, because NASA knows who he is and named this moon crater after him. So why is the USGS using a version of the world map designed by a 1,000-year-old Persian scientist? Because it's correct. That's why.
First off, when you have like 100,000 craters to name, you have to dig pretty deeply into history to find enough scientists and scholars' names to use. Using his name means absolutely nothing, and it's completely irrelevant to the shape of the Earth that a guy 1,000 years ago thought it might be helpful to have a map that shows precise distances from a single point. There he goes again, lying by omission. He wants you to think that Al-Biruni came up with this particular map 1,000 years ago. He didn't. He came up with the idea.
So to be clear, let's compare them again. The United Nations flag, the USGS official map of the Earth, and the Flat Earth model.
As far as I could find, the UN used that map for their flag because it shows all the land on the planet in one image. It's not the USGS's official map of the Earth. It's used by surveyors and telecommunications companies, and it being the official Flat Earth quote-unquote model doesn't mean shit either, aside from how little you've researched what the map actually means or how it's used.
All identical, but one isn't recognized and instead ridiculed as an outdated look at the world.
Because one of them is a complete load of horse manure used by people that don't have any idea what anything actually means, and have no intention of ever learning what anything actually means, including this map. Why not use a different version of the same map? Like this one that's centered on the South Pole. Or this one that's centered on Sydney. Or since we're all Northern Hemisphere snobs, how about this one that's centered on Los Angeles? Or this one that's centered on Taipei? They all do the same thing, but notice how different they are?
And this is one of those political quandaries that the authority gets stuck in. The short version is this. The government is on the same page as the flat Earth, but they can't admit it, even in confidence. We know the Earth isn't flat, they say, but it really is.
No, it really isn't.
We know you use the same map as we do.
Even though you have no idea what it actually is.
But ours is just an image, and anyone who says differently is obviously crazy.
You're not crazy. Just because you use a particular map to define your worldview and haven't gotten around to actually finding out anything about it, even when you went to the wiki page, Mark, you went to the page to grab images, but did you read anything about the map? It explains it to you. All you have to do is read the page. No, you're not crazy. You're a con man and a liar.
It makes you wonder how long the USGS has been using that model as an official reference.
Probably as long as they've been in business. There are other maps that they use too. Here's a quick summary. There's the orthographic projection, the stereographic projection, the Lambert azimuthal equal area projection, and the star of the show, the azimuthal equidistant. Notice how he didn't mention any of the other ones? I wonder why that is. And there are others as well.
The United Nations started using it for their logos in 1945, and then made some final adjustments in 1947. And the UN flag also raises a few questions, like, why isn't Antarctica represented on the map? Is it supposed to be assumed in the outer circle, or perhaps the spiky olive branches on the outside? They don't mention it anywhere online.
The United Nations is a group of countries. Antarctica is not a country. The olive branch is a universal symbol for peace. And this guy is the flat earth leader, folks.
And this is what I like to focus on. The gaps, the holes in the plot, the unanswered questions. The USGS using the same map as the flat Earth.
No, dumbass. You guys use the same map as the USGS. Don't twist it to make it sound like you had it first. You don't even know what the map does.
But not saying why. Not recognizing it. Or that you can't link the very same image from the Flat Earth Wiki back to the actual AE definition of the projection.
Because Flat Earth doesn't deserve to be mentioned on a site that talks about actual science or references how government agencies use the map. This map is not an accurate representation of the Earth. It's an accurate representation of distances between a single point and every other point on the map.
The authority figured out in the 1950s all of the borders of our enclosed world, and have done a great job hiding it over the decades. But the world's a complex place, and there are clues out there just lying around. I think it's time you saw some of them.
I think it's time we saw you for what you really are. A con man, just like the rest. Well, that does it for this video. Wow, around 12 minutes. I guess time does fly when you're making fun. Well, if you like my content and you'd like to see more of it, please give the video a like and the channel a subscribe, and make sure you come back next time. And until then, as always, have a good day.